We jump into game number 1 here down in the bottom right-hand side of the map, Romanticide. We have our blue Terran player from Team Liquid. He is Clem.
And his opponent in the northwest, the red Terran player, he is HeRoMaRinE.
Now, Nate, I do think it's worth mentioning because we don't see any cheeky proxies or anything, but HeRoMaRinE, normally known as like the pretty macro-centric guy and everything, but it is worth mentioning that in some of the more recent games and stuff he's played versus Clem, he's absolutely been willing to throw out some of those cheeky proxies, like a starport or going for the 2 Raxes to just flood out a bunch of early Reapers and stuff. So I think that we do have to keep an eye out on just kind of like the strategic choices for both these players in their openings, because I actually do think this is one of those matches where a lot can potentially happen in it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. And think about the map that we start this series on, Romanticide. This is literally the, if you want to be my turtle, you know, you have to get to 3 base. And this is the map that you can do that on. Yeah, you have to go to Earth 3 for that rendition of Spice Girls song. But what I'm trying to say is this is the map where all of the options are on the table. And even some of those cheese builds. Do I think that we'll have a lot of cheese in this series? I would say probably not. You can't be as good as HeRoMaRinE in such a competitive environment. And he's not a very cheesy player himself. But to play the way that he likes to play, you have to be rock solid against a lot of these types of builds. You have to have, you know, tiers of backup strategies for the way that you're going to control your units to try and deal with whatever gets thrown at you. Now, this is an interesting way to start, though. So he's not, you know, I say not cheesy, but he goes for the very fast reactor first on the barracks. So you're basically saying, okay, I can't really build anything at the beginning of the game, but assuming that I don't get cheesed, and this is kind of what I was alluding to, I don't think that Clem would want to cheese HeRoMaRinE, because that's specifically the kind of thing that he practices against, in my opinion anyway, especially as a streamer. Playing on the ladder, you're going to run into a lot of those aggressive strategies if you're trying to play macro builds. But going for this double Reaper and then getting that Hellion out, if he's able to force a little skirmish in the middle of the map, Clem might find himself thinking that it's like, oh, okay, 2 or 3 Reapers, or maybe 2 Reapers, the third one's on the way. 2 Reapers, 1 Hellion is a normal setup, but instead of 1 more Reaper showing up, it's 2, and then everything snowballs out of control, which is one of those, you know, it's like those dark secrets we don't tell you about when we cast, because pro players are generally good enough to avoid that situation from happening.
Yeah, we're actually seeing that Clem is being pretty conservative with his units for the most part. He has poked out a little bit onto the map before, but now he's finally going to start moving out a little bit further. And he's going to encounter HeRoMaRinE's units a little bit spread out, as the Hellion and the 2 of the Reapers are on the far backside, and they're just going to circumvent the army. This turns into a very awkward situation over here, Nate, because
this is really bad. This is really, really bad. This is one of those things that goes borderline potentially game-ending bad. His natural isn't going to finish. The ramp is a bit forfeit. Now I'm going to double back and say, thank God he went for that reactor opening, because I think that's what keeps this from being too damaging. If he's building 1 unit at a time, he could just camp the top of the ramp. But being able to get a couple of those extra Reapers out, a couple of those extra Hellions, while that is nice, it's important to keep in mind HeRoMaRinE's supply capped now. He's going to finish these Marines, and until that command center is done, that extra 15 seconds, he can't build anything. So these are the awkward spots. Losing the Reaper actually opens a little bit of that back up. But when your harassing units are caught on the other side, there are so many times where those Reapers run up into the main, the Hellions push the ramp, and the map control for Gabe is completely gone. And he does know what's happening. He sees that Cyclone. I believe he saw the medevac, but there's not a whole lot to feel good about just yet, because you need that gas in the natural as early as possible in order to build tanks and Ravens at the same time. So he gets a little bit of a knockback to start this one off, but nothing too crazy yet. We'll see how he handles this defense.
Yeah, the early game units can absolutely, you can end up losing them, and it ends up being somewhat okay if you can make it past this early game stage, where you see that Clem is not done just yet, and he comes in over here with the Cyclone. There's the Cyclone lock on from HeRoMaRinE onto the medevac. He doesn't quite manage to get it, but he is able to snipe off quite a few of the units over here for Clem. Softened up Cyclone as well is going to get locked onto. Nice pickup there from Clem. Saves the day with it. and is going to be able to back out of there more or less alive. At the end of the day, it's some trades on both sides, but it all is pretty much the early game units that get traded out.
And it turns out that, you know, like it ends up not being the end of the world. I still think that it's potentially really dangerous when you get your units caught like that. But that kind of goes back to what we were discussing earlier. HeRoMaRiNE's a very good defensive player. He's very patient. He recognized that even though he couldn't really get out and do anything with the Reapers and Hellions, that he still had, because of that early reactor, because of the build that he went for, he gave himself quicker access to the infrastructure that he needed to make the defense happen. And auto turret harass going to come in from Clem. Always have a little bit of a question mark on some of these types of plays. He is going to get a few SCVs. I think that's still counting the ones the Reapers got in the main base. It's actually DeMuslim. I think DeMuslim was the first player that I saw in a TVT say, he's like, well, if you're going for Ravens and your opponent's going for Ravens, and they're just going to come throw their energy at you, you know, they're not going to have an interference matrix to defend. If you like go for a counter tank push or something like that, it's always risky when you move the Ravens across the map. But he's just going to go straight for that third base, Clem, and HeRoMaRiNE is going to take the next assertive step in this match to try and put some pressure on, while Clem also moves out. So Fear Dragon, things are already getting freaking weird, and it's only game one. Okay, get your coffees, get whatever it is you're sangria. It's Sunday. I don't care. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I feel like Sangria might be a little more appropriate, as both these players have completely missed each other's armies, but HeRoMaRiNE's going to be the first one to arrive, which does mean that Clem is going to be a little bit later to the punch. This does turn into a really weird siege up your opponent's natural kind of situation, as HeRoMaRiNE should be realizing now, yeah, what's going on. The Ravens are just going to try and auto turret down the siege check up at the high ground. One Raven does go down for the trouble, but Marines manage to survive and push back those Vikings. Siege checks on the low ground, flipping up SCVs. This is absolute madness for game number one.
Well, you know, I guess now I know why I'm here. It's because some absolutely insane stuff was going to go down. Just that one Viking to defend is not going to be enough. Like, you're not really you shouldn't be able to finish any units. And if you do, they shouldn't be able to get away. So you start to ask yourself, like, are you going to try and relocate the production? Are we going to fly our stuff across the map? I think the last thing you want to do in a base trade situation is let your production get killed. If you have an extra command center that you can use, great. But imagine if you lift off that starport a minute, or, you know, right as they're basically on top of it, float it away and try to build banshees in the corner of the map or something. If you can kill the Raven.
Wow. SCV pull
just gives up.
The SCV pull from Clem, along with some of the units that came out, were actually enough to just clean up enough units. And HeRoMaRiNE realized he just didn't have enough to actually survive a base trade anymore.
I might need to check the end of that if he had any of the Vikings still with that, because that's part of what makes defending those types of attacks really hard. Vikings deal double damage to mechanical units. SCVs are mechanical. So when you go for those pulls, if they've even just got like one or two mixed in with those Marines, they evaporate super quickly. But those are those games that it's just That's why I hate playing TVT, because it's unbearably stressful when you're like, okay, I made the defense, I'm gonna move out, I'm gonna try to go across the map, and right as you get there, the other guy's at your base, and you're like, well, this is not the situation that I was looking for. This is not the 40-minute romanticide siege tank line down the middle, Maginot line, nobody's moving anywhere situation that people were possibly expecting. It was just one of those. How did we put it? I guess a sangria-worthy game. Fear Dragon, we'll call it. Yeah, it was. I think it's also really important to note that part of the reason that kind of craziness can happen in that game is because it happens so. First of all, there's the early skirmishes where they trade out a lot of their really early game units, like a lot of those Reapers and stuff either go down during the little fights, or they go in from Clem's side to like get some additional scouting information and everything. So like the unit spotters that would oftentimes be maybe a little bit further out on the map, to see one of those pushes coming across just aren't there. It's like too early on in the game to really be able to just sacrifice like even just 3 or 4 Marines to put along the different pathways, right? Like maybe a few minutes later or something, yeah, you have a big enough army, you're putting out those spotters, you're maybe thinking about throwing up the sensor towers or something soon so you can see if your opponent's army's coming from an angle, but like it just happens at such an early game stage of the in the game, it's not really possible. So
it just created a really, really weird situation. But Nate, did you get a chance to rewind that game? I'm really curious if we missed something big at the on the trades there.
So I didn't. There weren't really many units inside of Clem's base at the end to defend that. But I think what did it was the barracks were on the right side of the main, and he kind of went past those. Stim finished while the SCV pull happened, and he had about 4 or 5 Marines that he had built and kind of tucked off to that side. So he pulled all the SCVs and stimmed like 5 Marines while the siege tanks were shooting workers, and I think that was what helped him just completely wipe that army out, was just having that little bit of extra oomph early. I'm not even sure if the Ravens got all of their energy out during that. I was paying, if I was looking to the side, I was paying attention to the delayed stream, just trying to get another look at that. But that's the kind of crazy stuff that happens in TVT. You got to be on the ball. You got to be ready. You got to constantly be aware of where the opponent's army is, because if you don't, then this guy is going to strut into your base and grab a big fat dub. In the Northeast, he's the Blue Terran. He's Clem.
And down here on the bottom left-hand side of the map from Mouse Sports, he is HeRoMaRiNE. Well, Nate, I can only assume that's not a representative game of what we should expect from the rest of the series, right? Like that is not a normal game of TVT between these two.
No, that's one of those really weird games, and I can always tell because then the comments at the end of the game, everybody's like, "What? It was obvious. What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, that's how I really know." As long as the people in chat think that they understand it 100%, then I know it was a crazy game. So we're gonna have double gas openers this time. A little bit less on the rush to expand, a little bit more on the I want to have everything. This is your bread and butter build for TVT. This is your I want to play ladder and not die to all of the random things that people do, but I also want to expand. So you'll typically see that Reaper start up with the factory, pull a SCV or 2 or sometimes 3 off of gas, build your command center behind it, and just build Reapers and Hellions, because it's one of those few things you can just blindly do that you won't die to, like, if you micro properly, you won't die to like a proxy Marine or proxy Reaper. But if you just try to do like a blind Reaper expand and somebody's got a 2 or 3 racks outside your base, you are really likely to just die. So that's what we see. SCVs come off gas, and the factories are on the way, Fear Dragon.
Yeah, normal looking kind of 1-1-1 setup for both of these players. I do want to bring it back to something in that last game, which I think you actually pointed out right before it ended up happening. But Clem did do something kind of interesting with his first Raven and doing that auto turret harassment, which then you brought it back to, you do the auto turret harassment and there is a push, you don't have quite as much interference matrix energy like quite as early on for that big fight. And I do wonder, like, that was very, very properly timed out for HeRoMaRiNE to just make the push as soon as he saw like the auto turret harassment happened, wait like 10 seconds for the next round of production to finish up, and HeRoMaRiNE goes. So I do wonder if Clem is actually going to be, with this kind of 1-1-1 opening, you do eventually start thinking about getting up those Ravens as well. I am interested to see if Clem goes for another similar kind of like auto turret harassment movement again, and if HeRoMaRiNE feels like there's any adjustments that need to be made in this game.
Well, we could go a level deeper, Fear Dragon. Perhaps the reason why Clem went for the auto turret harass was specifically because he knew that HeRoMaRiNE would assume that he'd have less push/anti-push power, and thus assumed that Clem would probably take a little bit of a backseat and open up the opportunity for HeRoMaRiNE to push with Ravens that had more energy. And in my mind, maybe that was Clem's plan the whole time, was to do that move out anyway, because he knew HeRoMaRiNE would push him. But I think one of the other big things that came into that was also that HeRoMaRiNE went for the third base. Clem went straight for his natural ramp. So you were right that HeRoMaRiNE reached his base earlier, as these Reapers are going to come up to the naturals, going to poke down that Hellion. Looks like we'll get an SCV. And a couple of Marines do finish out of the barracks. They're going to come down and try to help make this defense. Those Reapers, again, can be very snowbally. Very tense situation for Clem. If you make one miss move in this early game, if those Marines get popped with the Reaper, you don't get to mine the gas off this naturals early. And he's actually going to focus that one of those SCVs regardless, as that gas income on the natural is so big. But just to quickly finish my point, even though HeRoMaRiNE got to Clem's base faster, HeRoMaRiNE got to Clem's third, which he immediately lifted and moved. By that point, by the time that HeRoMaRiNE was actually able to get to Clem's natural, Clem had already taken HeRoMaRiNE's natural. So it isn't even just about, oh, we didn't see each other. It's that HeRoMaRiNE went for the more conservative place to try and make his attack. Whereas Clem, he went straight for the jugular.
Very, very true. And we're already seeing kind of interesting developments in this game. Like you were saying, there was the little back and forth trade there at the beginning. HeRoMaRiNE, you know, I'm actually really amazed with Clem's micro in those earlier fights, but we might see a little bit more of a fight over here. Clem rushed out the siege tank and completely just said, I do not need that early safety cyclone. He goes for this little push out, but the Viking pushing back the medevac, the cyclone plus the Marines just kind of overpowering these units over here for Clem. This is a really, really big loss over here for Clem if he ends up losing a siege tank, but keeps it alive and keeps the medevac alive so far.
I was gonna say that medevac's very low too, so I wasn't tremendously confident in the game of hot potato we were just getting into, but he does get a little pick up and move maneuver there. Those situations getting very dangerous. But he does still have that tank. It's that awkward thing because both of them want to do the normal TVT attack. Oxide is without a doubt one of the best maps for any type of early tank Viking attack. And it's not even just in Terran versus Terran, right? We see it in TVT all the time, but this is one of those maps where you'll have those crazy 2-base tank contains against Protoss, those big all-ins against Zerg, massive move-outs and pushes with the high ground, breaking down the rocks, etc. So I'm not surprised to see both of them go for that kind of play here, Ravi. But you know, the nice thing about them being good at the game is maybe we'll be able to get past that 2-base stage.
Yeah, I'm also really interested about some of the choices that Clem is making with his starport production, because he did manage to, during that fight, take a little bit of that Viking air superiority control. We can see now he has 5 Vikings out on the map and a Liberator out, but it's because he completely forewent the tech lab on the starport. He's not making a Raven right now, or maybe he's thinking about doing it soon, as I think he's starting up a reactor somewhere, probably with the starport, so maybe not. He's going to try and make this big push in with a very, very fast Liberator here.
Yeah, it is an interesting choice, but as you said, he had the air advantage. As long as you have the Viking count lead in TVT, you're in the driver's seat. There's very few situations until you're looking at 50 Marine armies that are going to split and bulldoze through a point that doesn't have enough tanks. Vikings are king in TVT. You can't spell Viking without King Fear Dragon, and that's because if you don't have air control in this matchup, you're super dead. Think about it this way: even with these tanks right here, as long as those Marines kind of soft cover them, he could take out the starport, he could land his Vikings and kill more production. But he sees the SCVs are getting pulled. At this point, focus down the Raven, probably land the Vikings and give a little bit of extra damage output on this. Is not going to be what he goes for, but he'll still blow up a bunch of the Marines. His push is going to get cleaned up, though, at the cost of a lot of lost mining time, several lost SCVs, not a crazy amount, but that's kind of interesting. I wonder if as soon as you see those SCVs coming in, if he had landed the Vikings on his tanks and then scanned maybe the main base for that one tank on the high ground, I do think that could turn out a little bit differently. But he's getting ready for his next attack anyway, because he still has the Viking count lead.
Yeah, he's been able to maintain the Viking count lead, and it's actually a little bit, it's even stronger than it was before. He doesn't have the Liberator anymore. I think he's still making that. It's worth mentioning, Clem is not exactly super far ahead on his third base timing, unless he can deny the third base over here for HeRoMaRiNE by doing something with this push. His third base is about as well timed as HeRoMaRiNE's. In fact, I think his orbital command morphed in a little bit later as well. So the Vikings are going to land. He's going to go for this.
Yeah, he just drops down, one-shots the tank. We talk about what makes Vikings good. They see that damage against the mechanical coming through. The medevac still gives vision for the tank to shoot the tank, focuses down the next one as the reinforcements come in, but that medevac only has 1 hit point, so loading anything into that feels a little bit risky business for me, Fear Dragon. I don't know about that. That 1 hit point medevac. Spend it all. Fix it! Repair your units, please, for the love of God.
Oh, man, the Marine got the last shot off on the Viking as the Viking fired off its volley and picked off the medevac. So both those players end up losing a lot of those units. We're starting to see that there is an army supply lead over here for Clem, though. And now he's got that Liberator. He doesn't have the air superiority in some ways, because he only has 1 Viking, right? I don't know if I'll call that air superiority exactly, but there's only 3 Marines in a siege tank out over here for HeRoMaRiNE. 1 Liberator actually beats the 3 Marines.
Yeah, it doesn't get too much better anytime soon. Again, HeRoMaRiNE needs to wrestle air control away from Clem. If he can do that, he can zone away the spotter units, he can zone away the Liberator, and once he's able to do that, then, you know, the reinforcement path defender's advantage. He should be able to push this siege away from him. But Clem has executed this flawlessly, and he's going to pick up his second game in a row. Fear Dragon, the prediction machine has crumbled. It has fallen. And I talk about HeRoMaRinE and I talk about patient play and all that jazz, but man, really in these middle of the map skirmishes, when you pay attention to what's dying, when you pay attention to which units are being picked off, when you have a chance to kill something, it's the Vikings. It's the Vikings. Air control is without a doubt the most important thing in Terran versus Terran. Beyond that, it's your siege tanks, your positioning. But if he who rules the skies rules all others, because as we saw there, those Vikings were integral for these attacks. And those Liberators, like, what are you're not normally in a situation, you're like, oh, I want to build Marines and tanks and medevacs and play bio. It's like, no, build Vikings. You're not allowed to build anything else. And if you do, you're going to die because I'm going to have more Vikings than you. And that's exactly what happened. So just really well played by Clem. I didn't think that his push was going to end the game, but here we are, 2 games in, 2 relatively short games, especially for the TVTs that we've seen in this tournament. And I'm a little bit surprised. I definitely thought, I knew that Clem had the potential to be in this situation. Like, Clem being up 2-0 isn't what surprised me. But the thought that both of these games ended up being this short is not really what I was counting on, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, these are not the kind of games I was expecting either, Nate. And yeah, even if Clem ended up 2-0, I thought it was going to be maybe like this kind of more back and forth thing going later into the game. But it almost does bring me back to what I was talking about before, where in their recent matches where HeRoMaRinE has won the series, Clem oftentimes was taking advantages like this. It's like what you were talking about before. You didn't expect that push to end the game. And in a lot of the other games that they've played, Clem didn't end the game with those pushes. He would do these kind of attacks and he'd get an advantage and he'd walk away with like a Viking count lead or something. And then the game would go on, and then HeRoMaRinE would find a way to kind of claw his way back into the game. So it's pretty strange to watch how this is happening, but these are some very, very targeted kind of things that Clem is trying, skipping the Raven entirely to just get that Viking count lead, that attack with like landing the Vikings to try and defend and not really killing a ton, but he still kept his Vikings alive. Like, it was all really, really interesting decision making, but I want to applaud Clem for being able to walk away from that situation and be like, okay, here's my advantage. I still have the Viking count lead. I didn't really kill many workers. Our third bases and stuff are tied. Our Marine count and siege tank counts are tied. Okay, just get out another Liberator and continue the push. Like, the Viking count lead is enough that I can carry this forward into a victory. Really, really impressive how he handled all that.
Yeah, really, and a really good win from. We're going to load into 2,000 atmospheres, and hopes are dashed a little bit here for HeRoMaRinE Fear Dragon, because if I think about slow, methodical, patient play, I think about maps like Romanticide, and that was the base trade game, right? And it ended so quickly that this next game ended up being super aggressive. And if HeRoMaRiNE's going to try to play ball on Clem's level, he's like, oh yeah, I'll just 1v1 LeBron James on the court. No, it's not going to work. I'm sorry. That's not what you're good at. And recognizing your strengths and weaknesses is as important of a competitive aspect as anything else in this scene. So hopefully he can get back to his own speed. But if he can't, then we're going to see a fat 3-0 for this man in the Northeast, the blue Terran player leading 2-0. He is Clem.
And down here in the bottom left-hand side of the map, the red Terran player with a lot to prove here in game number 3 is Mouse Sports' HeRoMaRinE. I mean, Nate, I think a lot of people came into the season thinking like, yeah, we got the Gatekeeper and he's just kind of there. He's blocking out all the new talent or like the new players and stuff from coming up into the higher echelon of Cyril, Raynor, Clem. And I think this was the season where he did really stellar in the groups, but then even after the groups, he's been doing really well. And it really seemed like this might be one of those opportunities for Big Gabe to show he's not on the outside of the gatekeeping. He's on the inside. He's made it to the inside. He's up there with the rest of everyone else.
Man.
Exactly. You know, he's the inner guard, not the outer guard here. But man, Clem is just really, really putting on a showcase over here with a 2-0 lead in some very wonky and weird games. I'm really just hoping, purely for like HeRoMaRiNE's sake, like that we don't have another really hectic, weird, short game number 3. Because I think that's just the way that HeRoMaRiNE does not want to go out of this. He wants to at least have had like a solid macro game where you can get into that comfort zone you were talking about. Even if he ends up losing that, at least he can be like, yes, I got to play like a normal game. It didn't just feel like I just kind of got dropped out of the tournament randomly in 15 minutes.
Yeah. But the reality is, in Terran versus Terran, that mid-late game has to be earned. There is no way to force it when you're up against somebody who knows how to apply pressure. TVT is a matchup that can be beautiful. It can be a slugfest. It can get ugly. And you could have 2 bloody guys going all the way to the final round and just falling over each other dead at the same time. But if you can't stabilize on 3 bases and be able to deal with those Viking tank pushes that are so common in this matchup, and you'll see them everywhere if you play Terran on the ladder. Those types of attacks happen literally almost like every single game. Someone's going to move out with a couple tanks, Marines, and Vikings, or Ravens. Someone is going to do it, barring like a proxy 2-racks that turns into something weird. But even then, at some point they'll get there and they'll make that attack happen. And I really feel like that's the reason why Clem is winning this matchup right now. He's done a phenomenal job of keeping the game hectic. He's done a phenomenal job of creating chaos. HeRoMaRiNE seems to like this Reactor Reaper Hellion build, but it hasn't afforded him the advantage that I think he was looking for in this series. It's a little bit more early game oomph, but we haven't seen him delay the command center, really. We haven't seen him clean up a mineral line early on. We haven't even seen him been able to get a jump on a unit like a Cyclone. And hey, maybe this could be the round where that happens. There's certainly a lot of kill pressure with these types of compositions, but then no, the next Cyclone comes right on time because Clem knows what he's doing. He has an understanding of the expectations, and his strategy this game is pretty. Even I'm making a weird face. That's something I have not seen in a long time. He's going for the Cyclone Magfield. Even that is not the most insane thing, but that with a Banshee with no cloak is just. Does he think that he's going to be attacked soon, or it's just a very interesting setup to go for that you don't often see?
150% agree with you there, Nate. This is a very interesting series of choices over here. I do wonder if this puts a bit of a timer for Clem to get something done with these units, because if HeRoMaRiNE does do like a normal transition out, there is a point where, it go back to like the age of box wars in TVT of Cyclone versus Cyclone. There is a point where your opponent gets out. Yeah, I know. Sorry, I'm giving you a little PTSD there.
A lot of us have tried to bury those memories, but continue.
But once you get out like a couple of siege tanks, suddenly the Cyclones just drop off very, very quickly in value, and the abilities that you can actually, accomplish a whole lot with them. So there is like a window where you want to get something done if you're going to go for all these Cyclones. He does actually stop at just the 3 right now, and the Banshee is going to be able to make its way out of here alive, loses half of its hit points, but picks off 4 workers. I mean, not a terrible start over here for Clem, considering he's going to have a very harassment-based army.
Yeah, I actually don't like this move out because he's going to get a couple of the Reapers, but he loses that Cyclone, and this is right as Magfield Accelerator is finishing. And I think that you just said it beautifully because the barracks are starting, but Cyclones are worthless as far as army units go. They are not strong. They are not durable. The Cyclone in TVT serves the role. It plays a similar role to that of a Queen for Zerg, except, it has 50 less health and costs 100 gas. So you have a little bit more range with a lock-on, but you don't actually want to move these things out on the map and make them your primary aggressive unit. They can get run down by Stim Bio armies. They don't have the hit points to tank any damage from siege tanks or mines or marauders. So definitely a nice pickup for HeRoMaRiNE that sets him up for what will hopefully be a little bit more of an even game as that 3rd command center. Again, he floats it over before he even turns it into an orbital. He wants to assert that position and get it set up as quickly as he can so that HeRoMaRiNE has nowhere to make that early siege on the main base. And even though you think, oh, hey, you should be able to attack him, right? He took the 3rd so much faster. That hasn't worked. Clem's been the one that's been winning all the early fights for 2 games now.
Yeah, Nate, we are seeing a move out over here for HeRoMaRiNE. I just want to really quickly fact check something. I thought Clem made 3 Cyclones and then made a tank, but he lost 2 Cyclones and now he has 2 more. Did he make a fourth Cyclone after everything?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh my
I think
God.
he had another one. He had another one building as mag
Was
fuel
this the
finish,
game
I
plan?
believe.
He just snipes
Yeah.
off Stim.
He snipes Stim. And that's the weird thing about Cyclones is if they can attack armored stuff and not be attacked, they're great. They are good in the early game, but once tanks come out, they lose a bit of that strength. However, like we've been saying, every game, HeRoMaRiNE's like, I want to go and attack and do something. And Clem's like, I'm actually already on the other side of the map. He's going full Omemowo Shinderu on him. Tanks are still up though in the natural for Clem, but he's got 2 of them interference matrix. Auto turret's gonna get dropped down on 1. Second one gets popped. Third one is trying to hold the door, but it's not gonna be enough. The Marines got choked up behind it, and Clem's Vikings are gonna come to push these Ravens out. But HeRoMaRiNE still has some forces on the ground. He's going to retreat. The Cyclones have killed an unholy amount of workers. Was that the Ravens? Did the Ravens drop auto turrets on that too? It looks like it. Yeah. 3 kills on one, 6 on the other. And this is what happens. You think to yourself, okay, you know, I guess HeRoMaRiNE was probably thinking the same thing I am. He's like, oh, the Cyclones aren't the biggest thing to worry about. And then all of a sudden they've killed all of his units. Gets the siege tank too.
Oh my God. And the auto turret also stopping up another siege tank. He gets a Viking. HeRoMaRiNE is sending his entire army to chase down these 2 Cyclones that have effectively evened up the game. A Reaper goes down, another tank lock on. Oh my God. And that's with the full health Cyclone. He gets another tank here. Nate, these 2 Cyclones. Okay, can we please get a look at the kill count?
This is not supposed to happen. This
14
absolutely not to happen. Absolutely not supposed to happen.
Between the 2 Ravens and the 2 Cyclones that are all still alive, Nate, there's over like 25 kills on them.
Yeah, that's and let's not forget Fear Dragon. He canceled Stim. He canceled Stim, but wait, there's more. As HeRoMaRiNE starts his engineering base, 1-1 is done for Clem. So even if he did have Marines, and even if they did have Stim, they'd still be weaker. Now he pushes in with everything else. That's it. We got 3-0 for Clem.